What do you mean the manager hasn't approved overtime in 3 months? How are they cleaning the place? Harrison McCoy asked, staring at the spreadsheet spread across his desk. He owned all 7 locations of the fast food chain, buying them from a retiring couple 8 years ago. Back then, he'd been on the floor every day, fixing fryers, training new hires, even mopping floors himself. But as the business grew, so did his distance from the day-to-day. Now, he ran things from his office 3 towns over, relying on district reports and manager check-ins. But lately, things weren't adding up. The complaints had started small. Dirty bathroom, trash overflowing, rude staff. Harrison chalked it up to a rough week. But then the numbers came in. The payroll from the Westview location was oddly low for a store open 16 hours a day. Yet their sanitation supplies were being reordered at the same rate. Something didn't sit right. He called the district manager. "You been to Westview lately?" "Last month, yeah. Everything looked fine." "Did you talk to the night staff?" No, just the manager." "Why?" Harrison didn't answer. He stared at the spreadsheet again. Clean bathrooms. Minimum wage janitor. Low payroll. Something was wrong. That night, he made a decision. He was going undercover. Harrison contacted a small costume designer he'd used before for a charity event. They created a full disguise graying beard, glasses, dyed hair, baggy uniform shirt, and a fake name badge that read, "Doug." He practiced walking with a slight hunch, changed his voice just enough, and made sure to cover the small scar near his left eye, the only memorable feature from his old employee photos. He never met most of the current hourly staff at Westview. There'd been turnover, especially after the pandemic. That store had gone through 3 managers in 2 years. The current one, Lex, had been there 6 months. Harrison had only spoken with him once on a Zoom call. He called Lex 2 days later. "Hey, this is Doug. I heard you're looking for someone to help with night cleaning. I got some experience. You available tomorrow night?" Lex asked. "Yeah. I can start then." "Cool. Show up at 10. Ask for me." When Harrison arrived at the Westview location the next night, the place was quiet. The last of the customers were clearing out. A teenage cashier gave him a look, then pointed toward the back when he asked for Lex. Lex stepped out a minute later. Late 20s, clean cut, with a voice that sounded like he was always in a hurry. "You're the new guy?" "Yeah. Doug." Lex barely looked at him. "Cool. You'll be shadowing Henry tonight. He's the only janitor we've got left. He'll show you the ropes." Henry was already mopping the back hallway when Harrison found him. Early 50s, lean build, face worn from years of hard labor. He didn't stop mopping when Harrison approached. "Lex said I'm working with you." Henry looked up. "You ever used an industrial mop?" "Yeah. Been a while, but I'll manage." Henry didn't smile, but he handed over the extra mop. "Let's go." They worked in silence for a while. Harrison noticed how fast Henry moved, no wasted motion, just years of habit and rhythm. He was thorough too. Got into corners most people ignored. "Been here long?" Harrison asked after a while. 3 years. Used to be 2 of us at night. Now it's just me." "Why's that?" "Other guy quit. Lex never hired a replacement." Harrison glanced at him. "So you're doing all this alone?" Henry stopped, leaned on his mop. "You see anyone else here?" Harrison kept quiet. They finished the kitchen, then moved to the dining area. The place wasn't filthy, but it was clear Henry had been stretched thin. Dust under booths, smudges on windows. He was doing what he could. "How many hours you working?" Harrison asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Henry looked at him. "Between this and the morning shift at the warehouse, about 70 a week. But here? 40 officially. Rest is off the clock." Harrison froze. "Wait. You're cleaning off the clock?" Henry nodded. "Lex says we gotta manage time better." But there's no way to clean this whole place by myself in 6 hours. So I clock out and finish the job. You serious? Henry looked at him. You think I'm doing this for fun? Harrison didn't know what to say. His stomach turned. They worked in silence for another hour. Then Henry sat down on an overturned bucket near the back door. You got kids? He asked. Yeah. One. Henry nodded. Same. My boy's 12. Wants to play baseball, but I missed tryouts again. Thought this job would steady things. Didn't think I'd be scrubbing fryers at 3 in the morning just to keep up. Harrison felt his throat tighten. He hadn't expected this. He came here to check on payroll discrepancies, not to hear a man explain how he worked unpaid hours just to keep the building clean. He glanced toward the office. Lex hadn't come out once. Why don't you say something? Harrison finally asked. I did. Twice. Lex says if I can't handle the job, he'll find someone else. But he ain't hiring anyone new. He wants to keep labor costs down. District manager doesn't care either. As long as the store passes inspection, nobody says a word. They finished at around 4 in the morning. Henry rinsed out his mop, his shoulders hunched. Harrison helped him carry out the trash. The alley behind the store was cold, and the silence between them felt heavy. Thanks for helping, Henry said quietly. No problem. Henry looked at him for a second. You're not like the other temps they send. Harrison gave a small smile. Just trying to do the job. As Henry walked off into the dark, exhaustion in every step, Harrison stood there alone. His hands hurt. His back ached. But it was nothing compared to what Henry had been doing night after night. Harrison stared at the building. His building. He thought he knew his business. But tonight, everything had changed. And he wasn't done yet. The next night, Harrison returned to Westview just before 10, stiff from the hours of sleep he didn't get. The first thing he noticed was the same group of tired-looking faces behind the counter. A girl with faded braids was trying to fix a register that wouldn't log in. A short guy in drive-thru was juggling orders and headset commands like he was used to doing it alone. No one looked under 20, but none of them looked past 27 either. Lex was in the back booth, sipping something from a sports bottle, phone in hand. He didn't look up when Harrison walked past. Henry was already in the stockroom sorting through the cleaning supplies. You're back, he said without turning. Figured I'd see it through. Henry handed him a bucket without making eye contact. Good. Because Lex added the lot behind the dumpster to the list. Says corporate's been asking about it. Harrison followed him out, glancing around. That wasn't on the checklist yesterday. Checklist changes every day now. He prints a new one every shift. They worked in silence for a while, scraping cigarette butts out of the gravel and picking up half-crushed food containers. Harrison noticed the motion lights weren't working. One flickered, the others didn't come on at all. Is this lot supposed to be lit at night? He asked. Henry didn't stop working. Used to be. Maintenance requests been open for months. Nobody comes. Back inside, the grill team was cleaning up early, even though the store technically stayed open for another hour. A tall employee with a sleeve tattoo glanced over at the clock, then at Lex, who gave him a nod without a word. They shut the fryers down at 10:30. Harrison leaned toward Henry. Aren't they supposed to stay open until 11? They do. Just not with hot food. Lex says it cuts cleanup time. The implication sank in immediately. Customers were still walking in expecting full service, but were being quietly handed cold leftovers or turned away. That wasn't just bad service, it was deception. And it was happening under Lex's watch. By 1:30, Harrison's back was already aching again. Henry disappeared into the freezer and came back with a cracked bin of degreaser. This is the last one, he said. Lex says we're burning through supplies too fast. Burning through? You're using one bottle every 3 nights. Doesn't matter. He locks the new ones in the office. Says he wants to encourage efficiency. They scrubbed the tiled kitchen floors with frayed brushes instead of the machine that sat unused in the corner. When Harrison pointed to it, Henry didn't even glance over. Machine's broken. Belt snapped 2 months ago. Why hasn't it been fixed? Lex says replacement parts are too expensive for a Q4 budget. Harrison stared at the machine. It would have cut their time in half. Instead, they were on their knees, cleaning by hand like it was 1975. By 3, Henry's breathing had gotten heavier. He wasn't moving as quickly. You all right? Henry wiped his forehead with his sleeve. I'll manage. You eating anything during these shifts? Crackers. Sometimes Lex lets me take a sandwich if there's extras. You're on your feet for 8 hours. You need more than crackers. I don't complain. I do the job. That's how I was raised. Harrison didn't push. He just handed him his own granola bar from his coat pocket. Henry looked at it like it was a $20 steak. You sure? Take it. A long silence passed before Henry said, You don't act like someone new to this. Maybe I've just seen enough to know what's right. Henry studied him for a second, then went back to scrubbing. The next night, Harrison arrived early and sat in the back booth before clocking in. Lex was there again, laughing at something on his phone. A few employees walked past with tight shoulders and avoided looking in his direction. Harrison watched Lex talk loudly about fantasy football while a girl in a headset tried to restock the sauce station by herself, her hands shaking as she dropped one of the trays. Lex didn't move. Harrison clocked in and started mopping the prep station. He kept his head down, but his ears stayed open. The conversations around him painted a fuller picture than any spreadsheet ever could. Did Lex really cut everyone's hours again? Yeah. I lost 12 this week. Said we weren't hitting metrics. Then why is he still getting full bonuses? Because he tells the DM whatever they want to hear. By the time they hit the restrooms, Harrison had seen enough. The soap dispensers were cracked. One stall door didn't lock. There was a note taped under the sink that read, Do not use leaks. Henry was crouched near the toilet base, scrubbing with a toothbrush. You know, Harrison said, this isn't neglect. This is sabotage. Henry didn't look up. Why stay? Harrison asked. This job's steady. I've had worse. You shouldn't have to accept worse. I've been through 3 managers. It's always the same. Harrison knelt beside him. Has anyone from corporate ever come here? Actually walked through? Only once. The old owner, I think. Years ago. Wore a tie, talked like he cared. Then never came back. Harrison's gut tightened. That had been him before he started managing from afar. Before the numbers on his screen became more real than the people running his store. The next day, he didn't go home after his shift. Instead, he drove to the Westview parking lot at noon and waited. He watched Lex pull up late in a sports coupe, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. He parked crooked, blocking 2 spaces. Then he strolled inside like he had nowhere to be. Harrison waited 10 more minutes, then walked in, still in uniform. The lunch rush hadn't started yet, but the prep team was already behind. Lex glanced up from the office doorway. You're not scheduled. I'm aware. Then what are you doing here? Harrison stepped in front of the counter, took off his glasses, and pulled off the wig cap. Lex blinked, confused. Then his face strained. You're Harrison McCoy. I own this place. Lex opened his mouth, then closed it again. His shoulders stiffened. We need to talk, Harrison said. Lex stepped into the office, wordless. Harrison followed and shut the door. Lex sat behind the desk, arms crossed. If this is about Henry, he's been exaggerating. We've had budget constraints. This isn't about Henry. It's about you. It's about shutting down hot food early. Denying overtime. Forcing off the clock labor. Failing to fix safety hazards. And manipulating reports to make it look clean on paper. Lex's face twitched. I didn't do anything illegal. Maybe not. But you broke every standard this business is supposed to stand for. Lex's tone sharpened. I've kept this store profitable. You saw the margins. I also saw a man cleaning bathrooms with a toothbrush because you won't order supplies. Lex's voice rose. You want to fire me? Fine. But good luck finding someone else who'll keep labor costs under target. Harrison leaned forward. I don't want someone who cuts corners. I want someone who leads. He turned to the door, then paused. You're done here. Effective immediately. Lex didn't speak. Harrison walked out and closed the door behind him. The staff outside looked up, startled. The tall grill guy froze with a spatula mid-air. Henry stood by the mop sink, expression unreadable. Harrison stepped forward. I won't waste your time. I'm Harrison. I own this place. And I've just let your manager go. No one moved. I've seen how hard you work. I've seen what you've been dealing with. That changes today. Henry's eyes narrowed. You really the owner? Yes. Then why'd you scrub floors with me? Because I needed to see the truth. No one clapped. No one cheered. But something shifted in the room. Shoulders straightened. Eyes met his, not with fear, but with something closer to hope. I'll be here all week, Harrison said. Working. Listening. Fixing what needs to be fixed. And this time, he meant it. By the end of the week, Harrison had spent over 60 hours inside Westview, half in Janitor's clothes, the other half as himself. He hadn't made any sweeping declarations. No dramatic speeches. Just observations, questions, and long hours beside the people who'd been holding the place together while he was busy reviewing financial reports. The morning after Lex was removed, he met with the shift leads in the break room. The table was old, the chairs didn't match, and a few ceiling tiles were water-stained. No one brought coffee. No one joked. They sat like people waiting to find out whether their jobs would still exist by the end of the conversation. Harrison stood, his sleeves rolled up, eyes steady. I'm not here to blame anyone who's been doing the work, he said. I'm here because I should have seen what was happening a long time ago. A woman named Ida, early 30s with a quiet presence, leaned forward. You really didn't know? No. I relied on reports. Numbers. I thought they told the story. Ida hesitated. People stopped speaking up. Lex made it clear that if you pushed too hard, your hours got cut. A young man with a scar above his eyebrow added. He used to post the schedules 5 hours before the shift started. Said it was flexible labor. We couldn't plan anything. Ida nodded. The turnover got bad. We trained new hires who didn't last a week. Eventually it was just the same people covering every gap. Harrison listened. He didn't interrupt. When the room fell quiet, he finally said, We're not fixing this overnight. But we are fixing it. Starting now. He didn't bring in a new manager right away. Instead, he rotated between the store and his office, spending at least 4 hours each day inside Westview. He worked the grill with Mateo, who'd been on the verge of quitting. He helped Ida rebuild the freezer inventory system, which had been neglected for months. He even helped a new hire, Serena, navigate the outdated register software that hadn't been updated since before the pandemic. One afternoon, after a lunch rush that left the prep line in disarray, Harrison was reorganizing the condiment shelves when Henry stepped into the back, his shirt damp, an old bandage at the base of his thumb. You're not supposed to be on this side of the counter, Henry said, wiping his hands on a towel. I go where the mess is, Harrison replied, crouching to move a crate into place. Henry glanced at the shelves. Lex used to say if we had time to clean, we had time to cut hours. And that's exactly why he's gone. Henry folded his arms. You keeping the position open? Temporarily. I'm bringing in an interim trainer to help stabilize things, but I want to be here until we're back on track. Henry nodded once, then looked off toward the dish sink. You know, I almost left last year. My kid had the flu, and I couldn't get a shift covered. Lex told me to figure it out or don't come back. I stayed. But I didn't forget. Neither would I. Henry didn't say anything else. But for the first time since Harrison had met him, he didn't seem like he was waiting for the ground to collapse beneath his feet. Midweek, Harrison brought in a field technician to assess the equipment. The floor scrubber was beyond simple repairs. The technician shook his head and said the belt had snapped months ago, and the motor had overheated from being powered without proper tension. Harrison authorized the replacement on the spot. He also noticed something else. The back lot's motion sensors were stuck in test mode. No one had ever reset the breaker after a minor electrical surge. A 10-minute fix had gone undetected for nearly a year. By Friday, Harrison had begun auditing the payroll logs. That's when he found the real issue. Over the past 6 months, Lex had been quietly deleting approved overtime entries in the scheduling software. The system allowed manual edits under manager credentials. He hadn't denied the hours, he'd simply erased them. The employees who noticed were told they must have forgotten to clock in properly. Most stopped asking. Harrison's jaw tightened as he clicked through the records. Names repeated. Henry. Ida. Mateo. Even Serena's first week had been affected. He printed the logs, highlighted the discrepancies, and called in his payroll coordinator from the office. They calculated the total in unpaid wages, just under $8,000. The next morning, Harrison stood in the break room again. This time, he carried a folder of individual envelopes. "I owe several of you an apology," he said. "Not just for what you went through but for what you earned and didn't receive." He handed out the envelopes personally. Each one contained a corrected pay stub, a check for back wages, and a note typed and signed by him. Ida opened hers and looked at the figure. Her eyes didn't widen. She just exhaled slowly, like someone finally letting go of a weight she'd carried too long. Mateo held his in both hands, staring at the paper without speaking. Henry didn't open his right away. He just looked at Harrison. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I did. I just didn't do it soon enough." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Ida stepped forward. "Do we get to tell people what happened?" Harrison nodded. "You can tell anyone you want. Then I'm telling my sister to apply again." She quit after Lex yelled at her for taking a bathroom break. There was a low ripple of laughter. It wasn't loud. But it was real. That afternoon, Harrison met with the district manager for the first time since the investigation started. The man looked uncomfortable, his tie too tight, his laptop unopened. "I should have followed up more aggressively," the manager said. But Lex was delivering on paper. "I didn't want to mess with a store that was hitting targets." Harrison didn't raise his voice. "You're not the only one who looked the other way. But from now on, when a store looks too clean on paper, I expect a walk-through. Not a phone call." He didn't fire the district manager. But he reassigned his territory and placed him under a new supervisor, one with a background in operations, not spreadsheets. On Sunday evening, just before closing, Harrison walked the floor one final time that week. The fryer station had been deep cleaned. The sauce counter was stocked. The mop sink had a new organizer hanging above it, with fresh gloves and labeled chemicals. Even the air felt lighter. He found Henry near the back, wiping down the side of the walk-in cooler. "Store's running smoother," Harrison said, leaning against the wall. "Still a ways to go," Henry replied, not looking up. "I'm not disappearing. But the crew needs someone permanent. Someone who understands how this place really works." Henry paused. "You find someone? I want to promote from within. Aida's interested. She's got leadership instincts, and the team already trusts her. I'll bring in a support trainer to help her transition." Henry looked at him, expression unreadable. "She'll be good." "I think so too." They stood in silence for a few seconds. "You know," Henry said, "my son made the baseball team this time. First practice is next Thursday. I already told Ida I'm leaving early that day. Harrison smiled. You won't need permission for that. You've already earned it. The following Monday, Harrison returned to the Westview location dressed in plain clothes, no disguise, no uniform. It was the first time since going undercover that he stepped through the door not as Doug the janitor, but as the actual owner. There was no announcement, no grand entrance. Just a quiet nod to the cashier who now greeted guests with a practiced calm. He made his way to the kitchen, where the morning prep crew was already at work. Serena was arranging produce in the cooler, humming faintly to herself. Mateo was coaching a new hire at the grill, showing him how to time patties without relying on the broken timer still awaiting parts from the supplier. Harrison didn't step in. He watched for a few seconds and then headed to the back office. Ida was there, leaning forward with a headset on, reviewing the revised scheduling software. Her eyes flicked to him, and she pulled off the headset. I didn't expect you this early, she said, still adjusting to her new role. I wanted to sit in on the vendor call. She gestured to the seat beside her. They're switching to line 2. Give it a second. When the line clicked over, Ida leaned back, listening as the supplier rep detailed the delays on the cleaning equipment shipment. She didn't interrupt, but when they paused, she asked 3 direct questions about delivery estimates and backup options. Her tone was measured, her notes precise. When the call ended, she turned to Harrison. They're still behind, she said. But they're offering a loaner scrubber. I told them to send it. Smart. She hesitated, then added, I know I'm still learning, but I'm scheduling overlapping shifts until we're at full staff. It's tight, but it keeps people from being alone on stations. That's what I was hoping to hear. They stood together for a moment in the office's cramped silence. The air still carried a faint trace of fryer oil, but the cluttered piles of ignored paperwork were gone. Ida had sorted through them during her first weekend in charge, dozens of unanswered employee requests, safety notices, and vendor invoices. She hadn't asked for guidance. She just handled it. You seem more confident this week, Harrison said. I'm still nervous, she admitted. But I'd rather be nervous than silent. Later that day, Harrison met with a technician outside by the walk-in freezer. The man pointed out the leak in the seal and how it had likely caused the inconsistent temperatures. Harrison signed off on the repair immediately. Inside, Henry was wiping down the utility sink, his pace steady but slower than it had been the week before. A new part-time cleaner was working beside him, a young man named Dev, still learning how to dilute the chemicals correctly. Henry glanced over. He's catching on. Think he'll stick around? Depends. If the hours stay steady, maybe. Harrison leaned against the wall. You planning to keep both shifts? Until the place stops falling apart. He wasn't joking. The backlog of deferred maintenance was still being cleared, and more than one appliance had failed in the past week. But this time, the response was immediate. Orders were placed. Techs were called. No one was left wondering if help was coming. Henry rinsed off a rag and hung it to dry. My son's got a game this weekend. Saturday morning? Harrison nodded once. You should be there. I will be. Ida already scheduled me off. They didn't say anything else. Henry returned to stacking the mop buckets. Harrison walked toward the front. At the counter, Serena was helping a customer with a complicated order. She didn't rush. She didn't fumble. When the customer changed their mind halfway through, she repeated the order back with a calm that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. When Harrison stepped outside again, the lot lights clicked on automatically. The motion sensors had been reset the night before. The alley was lit, the dumpsters cleared, and even the graffiti that had lingered behind the building for nearly a year had been painted over by a local contractor Harrison had hired on a rotating maintenance contract. That evening, he drove to the company's main office and pulled up the full employee roster. He sorted it by tenure. Westview had retained more long-term staff in the past 2 weeks than it had in whole quarters before. He wrote a short memo to the entire company, not a press release, not a speech. Just a letter explaining that the company had failed some of its people, and that the only way forward was to stay grounded in the reality of their daily work. He attached a policy update. All future scheduling and labor reports would include anonymous employee feedback sections. District managers would now be required to spend 2 full shifts per month in store, not supervising, not observing, but working. There were no bonuses announced, no slogans. Just a promise: if a store was struggling, leadership would walk through it, not around it. 2 days later, Harrison returned to Westview for another low-profile visit. This time, he didn't stay long. He picked up a sandwich, checked in with the prep team, and left a small envelope for Serena, an invitation to a paid training course in customer service leadership. She hadn't asked for it, but she'd earned it. As he stepped outside, he caught sight of Dev waving goodbye to Henry. The older man gave a short nod, then turned back to finish his shift. No fanfare. Just a man doing his work with dignity. Harrison paused near the curb and looked back at the building. It was still the same structure. Same parking lot. Same counters, same grill. But something had shifted. Not in the walls and the people. He didn't need to walk the floors forever. That wasn't sustainable. But he knew now what had to be done. Leadership didn't mean watching from a distance. It meant knowing when to step in, when to listen, and when to act. And more than anything, it meant never forgetting that the numbers on a screen only mattered because of the hands that made them possible. He got in his car and drove away, not with relief, not with pride, but with resolve. Because this wasn't the end of anything. It was the standard from now on.